The Cardinals signed this pitcher, Drew VerHagen, who was with the Tigers. I didn't know much about him. They signed him out of Japan. Well, of course, Fangraphs is all over it. I mean, Eric Lagenhagen's got a piece telling us all about him and where he was and what he did and how he's changed. I mean, that's why Fangraphs is great. I mean, it really is. And Ben Clemens is a big part of that. And he joins us now. Ben, it's been a while. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Bernie?
Doing very, very well. What did you think of that signing, by the way?
I just know very little about him. I kind of trust Eric that, these kinds of multi-pitch pitchers who look like they do pretty well in NPB tend to translate successfully. Not necessarily as a top of the rotation guy. I sincerely hope he's not our number one starter this year. But as just useful pieces, the Cardinals are really good at these signings. I think Eric understands the market for, often it's, former failed MLB players who went over to NPB, figured something out, and kind of come back with a new, more secondary heavy or different fastball approach. I'm into it. Like the rate is right for hey, we need some like fourth, fifth starter type. I noticed that a lot of teams seemed like they should sign Zach Greinke. Everyone thought they needed kind of an innings eater. And since there's only one Zach Greinke, I like making signings like this that kind of lessen the pain if you don't get the real deal.
Right, it's a good way to put it. And the Cardinals do have a pretty granted, we're not talking about a high volume number of players or pitchers, but they do have a really nice track record when they've ventured into Korea or Japan in recent years. So that's another thing too. Well, how happy are – I mean, it's a dumb question because I know you're happy, but how happy are you that we can stop talking and writing about, at least for now, competitive balance tax and all that stuff, and we can start looking at the Cardinals roster and other rosters everywhere around the major leagues and trying to figure out where everything stands. It's really fun. It's really, really fun, isn't it?
I just couldn't be happier about it. I told my editor, next time you want somebody to write about a tax or some kind of financial thing, I'm going to be on vacation. I need some time off. And look, it's nice to flex your financial chops once in a while, but once in a while, that's the key. And this was a miserable off season of just greed and sadness and impasses that didn't make any sense to me, learning bargaining terms. I couldn't be happier that it's all over. I've been overjoyed ever since hearing the news. Even though I had to rewrite an entire article about it, I just don't care.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, I'm going to ask you one thing about this, and it's really the extent of my interest. It really is, because I do value your opinion, and it's a simple question. Do you think, all things considered, the players came out of this okay? They made enough gains to where they should feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I do. I think that if they weren't going to try to change the arbitration service time system, and I think they kind of decided early on, we're not actually going to change that. Fine. I mean, I think that would have been really tough. Then
did we lose him?
I think we lost him.
Let's we'll reconvene and get him queued up again. These things happen, as you know. Technology. So we'll get him back on the phone. So meanwhile, we'll talk. What do we want to talk about for a minute? I don't know. We probably only got about a minute. Or
I do know one of the things we learned today also I didn't get to was 14 spring training games over 17 days. And we got Ben back with us now. So
I like that. Like that. Let's keep it busy and keep the train moving a little bit. Ben, we got you back. I don't know what happened. It's
Sorry about that. I think that's probably on my end. I'm pacing around my apartment just giddy with joy, and I may have walked into a dead zone. Yeah, I think I was talking about how the players made out, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do. Well, let's talk about the Cardinals because, I'm trying to sort of reset. It's not like I forgot everything, but it's always fun to kind of, okay, now we know we're talking about something that's going to happen. They're going to play a bunch of spring training games, and they are going to have an April 7th opener at Busch Stadium against the Pirates, and they will play 162, and maybe they'll add some people to the roster between now and April 7th. I don't know, but Let's reset you and I. How good do you think the Cardinals are as presently composed?
I think this is a good version of the Cardinals team that we're all pretty used to. They're going to play really good defense. They're going to pitch pretty well. They're going to hit enough. And I think they'll win like 90, 95 games. And I think this is the thing that they're best at, right? Like they make teams like this really consistently, and they get a lot out of kind of prospects that weren't very top guys. I mean, I'm doing a lot of our positional power rankings for Fangraphs right now, and you look through it, and it's like Harrison Bader's pretty high up, Tommy Edman, Tyler O'Neill, and none of these guys were, massive heralded prospects. And the Cardinals are just great at churning them and like figuring out a way to make those guys succeed. It's a credit to the development team, and I don't know, it gets boring a little bit to project them the same, but it's really fun to watch every year. And I think this will be, another good incarnation of the Cardinals teams of recent years. So a little bit higher kind of athleticism and fun than the doldrums teams like 2017 to 2019. I'm into it. I think this will be a good version of the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I think they've established, to your point, they've established a lot of credibility in that area. So if if we hear John Mozeliak in effect, promoting the idea that they really like Lars Nootbaar, and they obviously are pretty gaga over Juan Yepez, and we know that they're excited about Nolan Gorman. There was a time way back, when Walt Jocketty was a general manager, and I'm not even blasting him. That's not the point, but the Cardinals would really overhype their guys, and so many times the Manny Ibars of the world kind of let us down, right?
Yeah.
But now when the Cardinals get excited about some of these guys, I mean, I tend to believe them or buy into it, and I realize that it's not always going to work out, but I don't think they're blowing smoke necessarily.
Yeah, and huge credit to the development team too, because I mean, it's not like the industry, like the rest of baseball, just misses these guys every time. The Cardinals do a good job of getting buy-in from the players and working to players' strengths. And I mean, there's been times in the past where they haven't really supplemented that enough with, good players, and they've relied too much on internal extensions and stuff. But they've changed that in the past few years, and adding, Goldschmidt and Arenado in consecutive years has kind of raised their floor. And yeah, I think you're right. Like, they don't really overhype their prospects. I have to tell you, I saw Yepez in the Arizona Fall League. I saw Nootbaar too, but he was fun. Like, he was goofing around with the fans, and also just like much faster bat speed than I thought at the plate. Looked like he had a pretty good idea of what was coming. I mean, the pitching there is inconsistent, but he looks like a real deal.
And even now, and I don't want to sound like a homer, but even now, it's interesting. He's a bit, pardon the cliche, he's a bit under the radar nationally. And some guys and women who do this for a living, including some at Fangraphs, who do prospect evaluations, he's not a guy that gets a lot of buzz, so that makes him more intriguing to me as a fan, because the Cardinals are clearly excited about him. And you just added some testimony, I guess, eyewitness testimony. So the more I hear about this stuff, and then the less I see written about him nationally, I'm like, oh, a little surprise here coming up. That's what Cardinals fans will hope anyway.
Yeah, I have talked with our prospect team about him, because I did some kind of non-top 100 prospects whose statistical track records look interesting to me. I write that article every year now, and Yepez is on my list. And so I asked the guys, like, what do you think? And the things that they don't like about him they won't surprise you. He's not an easy fit on the defensive spectrum, and he doesn't have a lot of years of proving it. And I mean, they're right.
Sure.
That's true. But I think if you told the Fangraphs guys, who, again, didn't put him in their top 100 prospects, have him kind of, in the top 10 on the Cardinals list, but not the best, not as good as Nolan Gorman, let's say, or Jordan Walker. If you told them, hey, like, he's going to be a major league regular for the next 5 years, they would not be that surprised. He has the kind of skill set that, lends itself, if he can hit enough, like, he'll have a spot. And I think that's more of a testament to, man, there's some really exciting prospects right now. But I don't think anyone thinks he's, not major league ready.
Gotcha.
It just looks like he's the real deal.
In a related question, our guest is our friend Ben Clemens from Fangraphs, who got his start writing for Viva Alberto's, which is still excellent, and we're happy also. We learned a lot from Ben when he was writing for Viva, and we still learn from him, obviously, at Fangraphs. So the related question is, I don't think the Cardinals are going to go out and sign, Kyle Schwarber, let's say. I mean, in fact, they're not.
Yeah.
So they don't have a firm plan for DH. They don't, they haven't spelled it out like this is exactly what we were hoping to do. What would you be okay if a lot of those at bats did in fact go to young players, whether it be Yepez, Nootbaar, Yepez, Gorman at some point? What's your attitude about the DH spot?
Yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. If there's a guy that you like that you can get for a 1-year deal, if Nelson Cruz calls you up and says, "I'm in, like, let's play in St. Louis," okay, fine. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, given basically the shape of the talent coming up. Like, Gorman is he a second baseman? Maybe, but not really. Like, he's kind of a corner guy who's a little bit blocked. Same with Yepez. Nootbaar's kind of blocked, but there's this DH slot now. And I think it would be a little bit counterproductive to get a bat who's not that big of an upgrade on these guys, especially considering that Nootbaar and Yepez can platoon. It strikes me as the kind of thing that is likely to cost you more in opportunity cost than it gains you in production on the field if you sign a guy right now. I mean, no disrespect to Dexter Fowler, who I think is a great player, but it would remind me of that a little bit, where if you do this, if you sign kind of an okay DH, you're painting yourself into a corner a little bit. And I would prefer them to not do that unless it's a 1-year engagement. I think
I'm
that's
with you.
Probably what they're going to do.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. That's not that it matters that we agree, but it's fun to agree. And yeah, I'm with you all the way. I don't see the point in blocking these guys because I think they're legit. And the sooner they play, the better they're going to get. Even if they have, again, pardon the cliche, even if they go through the almost inevitable, growing pains. Well, you got to get that part out of the way. And the Cardinals have gotten in trouble, like to your point about Dexter Fowler, but even with like a Randy Arozarena, because Mike Schilt wouldn't play him, they've gotten themselves in trouble by blocking guys, and it hasn't been pretty at times. So, and when you see talent like this coming along, you got to let it eat. I mean, that's just I'm all in favor of that. I really am, and I also wonder too, like. And I could be easily be wrong about this, but we always got to factor Busch Stadium into this too. I mean, I don't. Would some power from guys who have played elsewhere, would it translate once they got into Busch Stadium? I mean, Nolan Arenado, he really kind of wrestled with that last season, and I'll expect him to be better this year because he's determined to conquer Busch Stadium. But it's been a tough yard, especially for right-handed hitters. It really has.
Yeah, that's one thing that makes me like kind of not huge three-true outcomes guys a little bit more for the Cardinals too. And I think that the front office recognizes that. They're not out there giving interviews that say that, but if you look at kind of who they're prioritizing when they're adding pieces, when they're calling guys up, I think they have an idea of what they're doing. Now, if these guys struggle, if we're in July and Yepez and Nootbaar are both hitting like 210 with a 280 on base percentage or something, then go out and get somebody for the stretch run. I don't think that they've, this isn't a deal where those spots are bequeathed to them and no matter what they do, they should keep them. But it just makes sense to me to let them try and fail rather than go the other way by starting assuming they're not good enough. I also think that the division it's not like you need everything to be perfect to win the division. It's kind of going to be a slugfest of okay teams. So you have a little bit of runway.
Yeah, I agree with that too. All right, where do you register on the Paul DeJong meter as far as confidence that he'll find a swing that he's happy with and will stay with and will be more consistent? Paul DeJong, I'm telling you what you already know. I mean, Paul DeJong still, even when he's not hitting, he's got value. He's a good shortstop and he still does have power, but we all do hope that there's more there. What are your thoughts on him?
The longer I've watched DeJong, the more I get confused about how to think about his defense. I think he's a good defender. And there's just this consistent gap between you watch him play and he looks solid but kind of range limited. And then every metric thinks he's great. And that's not like made up. Like outs above average thinks he's great too. And that's a much better, more accurate, cameras on the field watching how many steps the guy takes and how much time it takes him to take them. Like he just is a good defender. And like you said, he can be a below average hitter and still provide value because of that. I'm starting to get worried about the bat.
Yeah.
Projections think he's going to be kind of an average hitter, and that's a good median expectation because I am not great at being smarter than the projections without a good reason to be. But he just looks so lost last year. And I do wonder if to some extent it's a confidence thing, and that's hard to pick up, right? Like, I don't know how you can manage that in a projection system, so they mostly just miss. I think that between him and Sosa, we'll get an above average shortstop position, but I'm a lot less confident in DeJong's bat than I was, say, a year ago.
I think that's fair. I keep looking for clues that will tell me, okay, that this is the key, my latest thing. And, humor me because I'm not saying I'm being facetious, but I like when I see something. In fact, using Fangraphs search engine or stat engine, like as bad as he's been the last couple years, when he pulls the ball at Busch Stadium, he's got fantastic numbers. I don't know what that means. I don't know. In fact, the next thing I'd like to see is like when he has he been pulling the ball less? But when he pulls it at Busch Stadium, a place that has generally tormented him since after his rookie season, I mean, the numbers are kind of like, wow, I wouldn't have thought that. But you go ahead and look at him sometime. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, he's one thing that would give me hope that he'll continue to be, I don't think he's going to be a great hitting shortstop. But if you look at last year, he was really unlucky on balls in play.
True.
Well beyond what you'd expect from, he's a righty, so it's harder to shift against him. It's not, and he's not completely slow. Like he's not Yadier Molina out there. He shouldn't be hitting so poorly on balls in play. He actually had some gains if you look at kind of his strikeout rate, a little bit better. His walk rate, look, his game is not walking, but he's walking at like a league average clip in the last 3 years, and that's great. I think you could talk yourself into, if you didn't see any of the results and you just saw, hey, like he slugged pretty well and he didn't strike out too much and he walked okay, you could say, oh yeah, he's kind of back. So I'm going to give myself like a little bit more time, but I do worry that there's just kind of a downward spiral there of Schilt pulls him and then he starts feeling worse, and he did look worse in the second half last year.
He did, definitely.
I just wonder if it's going to kind of catch up to him, not because his skills aren't there, but just because, man, it's hard to play baseball. And if you're not confident in yourself, things can go badly quickly. And I think he'll be okay, but I am less confident in that than I was a year ago when if somebody asked me, hey, do you think Paul DeJong is going to be a good hitter? I'd say, yeah, I wouldn't think twice about it.
I've got one more for our friend Ben Clemens of Fangraphs, and it's this. Like, in terms of moves that we would classify as realistic, okay, what's the one or two things you would like to see the Cardinals address before they open the regular season in terms of their roster?
Ooh. That is a tough question.
Yeah, see, because I put that realistic qualifier on there, But you know what I'm saying? That's how they are.
Right, like sign Carlos Correa.
Yeah, I didn't mention that one. That's right.
Yeah.
Are we just talking
one
bullpen?
Realistic upgrade.
Yeah. We're talking bullpen. We're talking fifth or sixth starter type. I don't know. It seems that's two areas that could stand to get some depth there, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I would not mind seeing one more bullpen arm. I think it'd be nice if they could get another fifth starter type, but where are they going to roster him? I just think that'd be a little bit tricky between, VerHagen's probably their sixth starter right now. We have him listed as kind of a swingman. I mean, that assumes health from Hudson and assumes health from Miklasz. He's obviously going to get plenty of starts no matter what. But I think like the kind of guy who you can sign and say, hey, you're going to be like our seventh starter, I don't think that's moving the needle for me. So I would like to see just a little bit of extra oomph for the bullpen. I wouldn't hate them trying to see if they can get Reyes into something more multi-inning-y. And I think that's difficult unless they have another late-inning arm that the team trusts. And I don't know how, like, who that would be necessarily, because, like, I mean, is it Colin McHugh? I guess I thought Raisel Iglesias would have made some sense, but he's, long gone. He signed before the lockout. Colin McHugh would make a little bit of sense to me as a guy who I would trust to throw some late innings. I don't know how the Cardinals see him, and I mean, I think I might be the highest guy on him industry-wide. I put him pretty high on my top 50 free agents list in the offseason, and Colin McHugh went on a Fangraphs podcast and said, wow, that was pretty high. I don't know if I would put myself that high.
You gotta love that. I love that though. Good for him. To say that. Oh, that's funny. I love that. That is so funny.
I don't remember his exact phrasing, but yeah, it was pretty good. He's a friend of Kevin Goldstein, a writer for ours, and seems like a great guy. That's selfishly, I also think it'd be cool to have a really, by all accounts, hugely popular among players and among fans pitcher on the team. That'd be great. But yeah, it's really hard for me to see them upgrading the starting lineup in any obvious way. Like you said, DH is the spot, and I don't want them to. The rotation is just like, I would have been interested in them signing Carlos Rodon before he went to the Giants, because he's a very high upside, and I wouldn't mind the Cardinals taking some upside. But after that, I mean, I would expect them to make marginal moves, and I think it's right. I'm perfectly willing to blast them for making marginal moves if I think they're bad ones. But I actually think it makes a lot of sense given the current construction of the team. Unless you see a huge upgrade, it's a weird time to try to upgrade these little marginal spots. And that's just not this year. If they had signed a big starting pitcher, if they had signed Scherzer, that'd be one thing. But at this point, I would prefer them to mostly stand pat and add an arm.
And maybe take advantage of opportunities at the trade deadline. That's the one thing I'll hold them to if it makes sense. They can stand to be more aggressive this time. Because look at, gosh, they weren't exactly super aggressive last summer, but yet they did with even with LeBlanc, who was a stopgap that was fine. But then Lester and Happ and the two relievers. I mean, they those turned out to be high impact moves. So it just shows you. I sound like stating the obvious, but if you at least try, you got a chance to move the needle. But I hope they're maybe they learned something from themselves and what they did last summer. I don't know. I hope so.
That would be great. I mean, I take off my Cardinals fan hat when I analyze them, and I take off my analyst hat when I'm rooting for them. But as a fan, I really hope so. That would be. It was nice, even though I was not a huge fan of the moves at the time, that they were doing something.
Yeah, I
was
wasn't
a big fan
either.
of that. I didn't love what the moves were.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, Jim.
I liked that they thought they needed to add. I remember I went on your show.
I know.
We were basically like, really?
That was the whole thing. Hugh and I were almost silent in the studio. We're like, what? And it's just, it turned out much better than we all thought. That's for sure. Well, Ben, I'm sorry I talked over you there, but by the way, it's just great to have you on, and thanks. And we'll be.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, and we'll listen. We will definitely check in with you before the season starts to kind of have an updated conversation about the Cardinals. As things start to shape up a little bit down in Jupiter. So. A lot of spring training games. Jim Hewer, if you can tell us, because you were telling me something during the break.
Looks like
how many spring training games are going to be for the Cardinals?
Cardinals say 14 spring training games over 17 days that end on April 5th.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Packing them in.
I know. Yeah. So maybe we'll talk about Ali Marmol next time. Just whatever impressions can be gleaned from spring training games, and I don't know, probably not a lot, but I do want to get your take on him. We'll save that for next time.
Sounds good to me, Bernie. All
right, thank you. That's have a great weekend. That's our friend Ben Clemens from Fangraphs, and I know what he's saying. I agree with it. Like, I don't know you want to make any marginal moves unless you have an injury. And they've signed these two pitchers from overseas. They obviously like them. They have a decent track record, a good track record signing pitchers out of the KBO and the league in Japan. And unless they're going to go big, it's almost kind of like, oh, what's the point thing. Although I do think they should probably sign another reliever, and I think they're going to make that effort. They need a little more insurance there, and it could be a guy like Colin McHugh. Just like the two guys they signed from the KBO in Japan that can start for you if you need to fill in your rotation, just as an occasional starter, and Woodford can do that as well. But they have to set it up right, like Ben Clemens said, because if you want to have, Reyes coming out of your bullpen early as like the second guy following the starter, if the starter's only going to go like 4 innings or something, you're then going to need to backfill, because if Reyes is going to pitch 2-3 innings, you're going to have to backfill, because then you're going to need somebody big in terms of like being good, somebody good that can then sort of work the 7th or the 8th inning and maybe do it a couple days in a row while Reyes bounces back from pitching multiple innings earlier in the week. So they have to put that puzzle together, but they definitely can do it. And I like Joe Kelly. There's so many relievers that are out there, Jim, as you know, and I don't feel like really selecting, because I know that McHugh would fit them really well. I think Joe Kelly would fit them pretty well. And there's some other guys too. Everyone likes the velocity of a Ryan Tepera. There's guys that have high ground ball rates that maybe they would look at that the rest of us wouldn't be so excited about. I don't know. I do know one thing. I'll tell you one thing that concerns me is this. It's just nonstop. It never ends. This Ryan Helsley hype. I just don't get it. And even the people that are right now are saying, well, Bernie, he was great when he inherited runners last year. His percentage was unbelievable. He didn't give up runs when he inherited runners. And I grant you, statistically, that's true, but I was looking at that today. I mean, in 2019, like 68% of his inherited runners scored. And in 2020, it was something like 30%. My point being, that inherited runner scored thing is very, very tricky. You got to be careful with that, because that tends to go all over the map depending on what year it is, But over the last 2 seasons, he's got a 4.70 ERA. He's got about a 1.4 whip. He's got a really big walk rate. His strikeout rate has fallen. He's had some problems keeping the ball in the yard, and I just don't get it. This attempt, and frankly, the media's got a lot to do with this. This attempt by the Cardinals to just consistently portray him, sell him as some kind of formidable bullpen weapon. The numbers say he is not that. So I'm bewildered as to what they're seeing, that every single stat you can apply will not validate. I don't know what they're seeing.
I agree with that. People see velocity and think that just going to translate to outs and domination, and it just doesn't with him.
No,
it just I'm there with you. If somebody's throwing Ryan Helsley at me, I'm going, let's knock on some other doors before we go down and make that commitment. Let's see who else is available.
And I'm not saying he shouldn't be in the bullpen, but the idea of him in a high leverage situation and just like, oh man, he's going to be like, hey, we got this set up. He's going to be the guy before Gallegos, or he's going to be the guy before Reyes, then Gallegos. I mean, I'm like, whoa.
Yes, I would throw Cody Whitley in front of him for me in terms of who goes first. Well, I'll go with Cody first, let him fail, and then we'll if we have to, then we'll go to Helsley. So.
And Helsley, last 2 years too. The other thing that jumped out at me, it's not like this guy gets soft contact. I mean, again, to your point, I mean, everyone's obsessed with the velocity. The velocity's produced a 22% strikeout rate the last 2 years, and the velocity's also produced an inflated walk rate, and the velocity's also been, I don't know, kind of short-circuited, if you will, because the hard hit rate against him in the last couple of years is like 44%. I mean, once again, somebody show me something. I don't. There's nothing there that justifies all this hype. That's all I'm saying. He's a fine fellow. No, really.
I know. I get it.
I'd like to see him be really dominant. He's not.
The high walk rate and just there's no. It's hard, but it's not swing and miss hard. That's what you just mentioned. The hard hit rate. It's like he gets hit a lot for a guy who throws as hard as he does. Yeah. So
I hope
that's a concern.
So I hope they do fortify the bullpen. And look, man, I'd like to make everyone happy by just saying like, I see some of my friends even like on Twitter, and it's just like, you go get Kyle Schwarber now, and it's like, I get the sentiment. Like I said, I'd be delighted if they did that, right?
Yeah.
But they're not going to do it. So why would I go on Twitter and and start in effect like stomping my feet? Like a kid that's having a tantrum or something. It's I don't know why people do that to themselves. Because it ain't going to happen. So what's the point? Now, if you want to say it should happen, you can make the case. But I understand why in the Cardinals' case, I totally understand why they want to give those at-bats to guys they're really excited about in terms of their potential to be really, really good major league hitters, So that's I'm kind of committed to that attitude about this.
That's the way they do their business. There's a part of me in the back of my mind, Bernie, going, I don't know if you can go with that many young bats and trying to succeed at that position. And not, you got to have some kind of veteran backup or fallback.
Yeah. Because
we see guys come up and you go, he's a little overwhelmed right now. He's still got to adjust. And you're going, yeah, but I need production from that right now. Well,
right.
It's not fair to that guy. He's got to go down. Then you're going, well, now we're going to bring some other kid up and let him, throw it to the fire. I think they got to find some veteran bat. I just don't know what that is. And knowing the Cardinals, it won't be a bat you're going to pay a lot of money for.
And I think they'll be able to get a bat like that later in the season too, and that's why I would say, start off with these guys, and if they're overwhelmed, this is just like Ben Clemens said, then you go from there. But that it doesn't mean that they ever were going to consider signing Kyle Schwarber. I mean, that's just like wishing for things that just aren't going to come true. I just can't go through life like that, It's just I just can't. But everyone else do what you want, man. You're all right with me. We'll talk about a couple other things related to this, and I'm just curious, like on our text line, what people would like to see the Cardinals do, or just tell us anything that's on your mind regarding the Cardinals and the run up to the 2022 season, which is going to be here in a hurry.